Today we have Fiona with us, a wonderful child psychologist that's gonna tell us a lot about how we can be good parents together in spite of the fact that we are so different. Hello, Fiona. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. So, yeah, we would really love to hear about you. And first of all, to hear a little bit about your story and what brought you here. Talk about family and child psychology and figuring out how this can all work together.
Thanks. I'm a clinical psychologist and I specialise in children and families. So I qualified a decade ago now, which seems crazy, but I've always had a real interest in working with children and families, and spent most of my career working in a children's hospital, so with young children and babies who were medically unwell and their families and the challenges that comes with that. And I've always had an interest in the early years, so the kind of under fives and how important that time is in terms of brain development and emotional development. And so then I had my own two babies. I'm a mum of two as well as a clinical psychologist. And I think my interest just peaked then because I was seeing it with my own eyes, this really amazing time of development. So I continued learning and studying and set up Baby Psychology Basics, which is something I do now alongside my clinical work. And I've set that up as I kind of hope to just start some conversations about parenting and baby development and things that I feel that I learned as a clinical psychologist that would be helpful for all parents to be aware of, really, but that's just not really out there. So I'm doing workshops and things, and also things like this to try and just get some conversations started about things that maybe we don't talk about that much in terms of parenting and attachment and child development. So
Yeah,
that's how
it's
I
really and it's really interesting what you're saying because um, some extra knowledge about brain development and psychology in general is something that we all need, right? It's not just for pathological situations.
yeah
It's really, and it's maybe it's becoming more prevalent now. Like people begin to realize that that's the case, but it hasn't been the case for a very long time. So there is a big work there to do to educate people, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I agree. It's definitely becoming more mainstream now, this idea around learning about your baby's development and the importance of relationships. But I think it's still clouded by lots of different sources of information out there about babies and baby development, and lots of people with very strong opinions about how you should be with your baby and what you should do with your baby. And what I always say to the parents I meet is I feel like it's, you're the parents, you make the decisions about how you want to parent your babies. You're the experts on your children, and the
Yeah.
way I think is a good way of doing that is just making informed decisions. So I feel like, well, if you were going to go and spend a lot of money on a car, you want to know how that car works and how to look after it, right? And just like when you have a baby, you can look to neuroscience research like you would do, and psychological research, and see what can help us understand our babies. And some of it we might just not agree with, or it won't work for us, and that's fine. But it's about having that information so you can make a decision knowing that you've got all that information before you make the decision.
Yes. Yeah, with Babylab at Essex University, we really like this idea of the parent as the decision maker, and then all the experts around as advisors. So
Yeah.
we do need the advice, we do need that insight, but then the way you do your own recipe and how you put it all together and to be the parent of this one child, then that's down to each single parent or the couple uh,
Yeah.
around the child. And that's the whole beauty about human beings, right? Like we are so successful in colonizing the planet, even a little bit too much maybe, because we are so adaptable and because each of us has a coach or two coaches just for themselves. So it's a hard work, but it's a very, very precious one for our species, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, we touched already a little bit on it. Baby and the couple. So babies are a gift for the couple, and we know that because we know how painful it can be when babies don't arrive in a couple, and that's I think can be a very difficult time. And yet, difficult times are there also when the baby is in the couple because it kind
Mm.
of opens up all sort of conflict or yeah, suddenly everything we discuss becomes extremely important to both of us. So why is it that it is so hard?
Yeah, and I think any parents out there listening to us will think of multiple reasons why having a baby can be really hard on a relationship, even though it might be a baby that you've been longing for years. But I think one of the big things to keep in mind is that transitioning to be a parent is such a huge deal. You know, you from one moment you have a baby perhaps in your tummy or in your partner's tummy, and the next moment the baby's in this world, and suddenly you're a parent, and you've got to look after this little baby for the rest of your life. It's a life-changing moment, in terms of how our lives change. We have changes in roles, we have changes in our bodies, we have changes in the relationship, and I think it's underestimated how difficult that transition can be for many people. It's a really exciting transition, but there's also things about it that people find difficult, not having the time to yourself, the sleep deprivation, and you're managing that transition as an individual, but you're also managing it as a couple. So you're both becoming parents, and you're watching this partner that you're perhaps been with for a very long time change as well, and maybe change in ways that you love sometimes because you see them nurturing this special baby that's your child, but also maybe changing in ways that you're not so keen on. Like maybe not paying attention to you anymore, or focusing solely on the baby and not them. And all these things are normal and natural, and it doesn't mean there's anything wrong necessarily with your relationship, but it can be really, really hard to adapt to. And I think the other big thing is sleep deprivation. All new parents struggle to get enough sleep. That's a part of parenthood, sadly. And it's when we're sleep deprived, we are less patient. We don't think as much about what we're going to say. We can't be as empathic as we would like to be towards our partner. So, that is a real good cocktail for difficulties in relationships. And like you said, Sylvia, you both care about this baby so much that if you have disagreements about the baby, which you will do, because we all have differences in what we think about parenting is and what we should do as parents, those disagreements feel really personal, and can get quite heated quite easily.
Yeah, it goes very deep, right? uh,
Yeah,
it, yeah, and you were mentioning all these changes. They really have to do with who we are, really, and
yeah,
with the difficult fact that we keep changing. We are not the person that we were yesterday, that we were on the day we got married, maybe, or we met each other.
mm,
And yeah, and as you say, some changes are welcome, some other changes not so much. Even for
yeah,
ourselves, like I can
yeah,
change in ways that I'm not so keen on. And
yeah,
then putting that together with how am I gonna relate with my partner around those things.
yeah,
Yeah, it's quite a tricky one. And
yeah,
of course, we haven't mentioned the big issue of the fact that we are probably overloaded with stuff to do, and and
yeah,
people are not enough to actually do all these things.
yeah,
And so I was really wanted to pick your brain on what about fathers who help, right? Like what's the difference between helping and co-parenting? Like
yeah,
what's there?
yeah. And I think, I love this topic, and I could talk about it for for hours. I'm sure you could too. But I think, before we even think about this question of, well, far are dads helping, or dads don't babysit, they parent. It's asking a dad to babysit. Well, that's their that's their child. That's parenting.
Yeah.
That's not babysitting. But I think it can quickly go into a kind of the realm of, partners don't do enough, fathers don't do enough. they need to get better at getting involved, etc., etc. But I think actually it's not really about that. It's not about blaming partners for sometimes being, not being a good co-parent. I think over the last few generations, we've seen huge changes certainly in the UK anyway, around the expectations of the role of the partner. So if we think just a couple of generations ago, it would be really unusual for a partner or a father to take the lead in anything parenting, to change a nappy or to feed the baby or get up at night for the baby. That was kind of unheard of in most situations. And fast forward to now, there's much more of an expectation that the parenting is more of a joint responsibility and an equal responsibility. And certainly from my point of view, that's a great thing, and a good move forward. And I think for lots of partners as well, that they want this, they want to be involved with their child. But I think the difficulty is the structures around families and around partners haven't changed very much. So, partners are now being expected to do lots more with their young children, but maybe still having to fight for paternity leave or fight for flexible working, making it difficult for them to actually kind of truly co-parent in the way that they would like to, where actually there's a kind of equal weight on both parents, on the safety and the upbringing of the children, rather than the partner being seen as someone who can have the children for a couple of hours at the weekend.
Yeah. Yes, it's a huge topic, right? That brings together personal choices, because again, it's a matter of a specific recipe of that one family.
Yeah.
Who does which job, how many hours, with there are so many different configurations as well. That's probably another thing that makes it more difficult to have structures that work, because before it used to be very homogeneous. Like you could expect the dad to do nothing child related, and the mom, you could expect her not to do much work related, and then you provide services in this respect. Now we're kind of there is a lot of variation out there, and so finding our way around it is another challenge for the couple. And at the same time, it's a degree of freedom. I guess we are all very grateful that we have this freedom, that we can actually figure out with our partner how we want to manage our family, what it means for us to be a family, really. But with freedom always comes responsibility and a certain weight, right, as well on the decision.
And I think without much guidance on how to deal with this freedom, because it's relatively new, this idea that partners can be just as involved as the mother. It's so we don't have our own maybe generations of parents and grandparents to look back on to say, well, how did you do this? How did you manage this freedom that we could maybe make it look exactly the way we want it to? How do we even want it to look? It's difficult.
Exactly. Then the big question comes and you're like, whoa. And then it's also a moment when you can realize, oh, actually, we don't want exactly the same thing, which would be only natural, right? Yes. And so, when it comes to this, there can be very different ways of responding to the child, and parents might differ. A very big one is sleep. What do we do when the baby cries instead of sleeping? And that's a place where your own need as an individual meet the need of the baby and meet the need of the whole family. And it's not so easy to square the circle, right? It's kind of a tricky one.
It's tricky. And I think, these are the kind of conversations that people don't have when they're preparing to have a baby. And that I feel it would be really helpful for us to have, because we all have different ideas about how we want to be as parents, or how we think is the right way to respond when our babies need us, or at sleep time, for example, how we think babies should sleep, or how we should respond when babies sleep. And the way we think about parenting has got such a long history for each individual. You know, it's influenced by how we were brought up by our parents, what we saw around us when we were children and seeing other people parented, what we've learned as we've grown up, the things that we want to do that our parents did, the things that we don't want to carry on doing that they did for us. So, you know, when two people come together as a couple and have a baby, there's all that coming with them. And then in that moment when the baby is crying and you disagree, one person says, oh no, come on, we just want to pick the baby up, she or he needs comfort, and the other person saying, oh no, because, you know, I've learned that you mustn't go to them every time because otherwise they'll, you know, never learn to be able to soothe, etc. That's a really difficult moment, because the disagreement you're having is based on all that history that goes behind you as well. So by suggesting the other person is wrong, you're kind of, it feels like a personal insult sometimes. So it's about having those conversations when they're not in the moment, when it's already a difficult moment because the baby's not corrupt, because the baby's crying, so everyone's feeling stressed, but having those conversations perhaps before you have the baby, so that you can have them in a way that is calm-ish. You've got time to figure the things out that you really disagree on, time to kind of agree on a way that you do want to work together as parents, time to agree to disagree on some things, because you're just never going to see eye to eye, and that's okay. But yeah, we just I don't think many couples do that or have the opportunity to do that before the baby's born.
Yes. And then, yeah, I think you're right. It's important to discuss it before. And then it's probably also important to expect that those conversations will need to be refreshed quite regularly. Because if I think at myself before my first child and the stuff I thought, you know, experience, and, you know, I already had my PhD in psychology, and, you know, it's not that I've learned massive new elements cognitively, but the experience has changed the way I look at them. And this is going to be the case for everyone going through an experience with one specific child. Will teach you stuff that you could never have learned in any other way. And so accepting that change in the way we think, and, you know, like, not kind of, because sometimes what we hear quite a lot is that you know, partners expecting the other partner to get, oh, but you said that 1 year ago, and now why are you not holding on to that? And I guess that's what makes it difficult as well, right? To incorporate that change.
Exactly. And I think, you know, I often say you don't really know what kind of parent you're going to be until you are a parent, because you have ideas of what you want to do and what you don't want to do. But until you're kind of in it, it's really difficult, because then you're driven by how you feel as well, and those kind of instincts, and the things that are hard to describe that also influence what you want to do and not do with your baby. So absolutely, it's so important to keep kind of updating those conversations and where you're at with it. And I think that that's difficult, partly because of time. When you have a young child, you know, to have time as a couple to have those conversations is hard. So if you've been able to have some of those conversations already, it's kind of easier to hook it onto, to update it. But if you haven't had those conversations already, it's never too late, you know, to start talking to each other, communicating about parenting and how you feel you want to be as a parent, and how they feel they want to be, and how you're going to work together as a team in a way that feels okay for both of you. You know, allowing there to be differences, and that's okay, but finding the bits where you really do want to kind of agree on a way forward it's important.
In your experience, do you think there is a format that works best, both just for the parents, and then maybe what would you define as a time where, like, a sign, okay, maybe you need a little bit of extra help there?
Like a way of coming together to talk and to think about parents. I mean, so I think it's different for everybody. So some parents would like to kind of formalize it and say, right, 7 o'clock on Thursday, we're sitting down with a glass of wine and we're going to talk about how we want to be as parents, thinking about sleep, thinking about dealing with big feelings in toddlers, for example, and actually being really specific about having a time to talk about this and creating a plan. And that works really well for some families, especially busy families, where if you don't schedule it in, it's not going to happen. And for other couples, that just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel comfortable enough to do it like that. So I think it's more about thinking about how you, as a partnership, how do you normally communicate about difficult things? And is that, doing what we just said, where you kind of make it an actual thing, a scheduled thing, or do you pick a good moment when you're both maybe on a walk, there's other things to focus on, so you can have a conversation without sitting like face to face a bit intensely opposite each other? Is it you send an email explaining your feelings? Everyone does it differently, so it's drawing on your own experience as a partnership. How have you managed disagreements before, or things that are really important before, and using those skills in this setting where you can then try and come to some sort of an agreement. And I think, knowing when to go for some extra support, I think there's different reasons why people might want to do that. So, some people feel really unclear about how they want to be a parent, or they feel like them and their partner really disagree on lots of things about parenting, and they don't feel well informed enough to know, well, which way do we go? What's the right way? And that's when I think it's useful to go and get information, basically, and from a good source about baby development, brain development, attachment, emotional development, all those sorts of things, and learn together, so that then you've got that information and you decide as a couple, well, what do we agree with? What do we not agree with? How do we want to go forward with this? And then obviously there's times, I think, when people just need a bit of help to have a conversation. So maybe that, the disagreement has become so strong that there's no way of sitting down together and having that conversation, because it's evoking so much emotion for either one or both partners, that they can't have that conversation. And that's when it might be helpful to get someone as a kind of third person to come in and support that conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yes. In any case, it feels like having the conversation is priority. Like it's true that babies go through phases and then they grow up, but then usually there is another phase of something else that's challenging. So waiting it out might not be the best strategy, right?
No.
Yeah.
Definitely not. No, in a simple answer.
No, because I think we can really see those disagreements that can start with what do we do when the baby doesn't sleep, rather than how do we deal with Christmas in the family, or like that. There's going to be around the Christmas holidays, there is also always like a special tension around what we do as a family. So they are painful moments often to go through, but at the same time they are going to be the moments that will define us as a couple and us as a family. It's what's going to kind of put us together and force us to figure it out. And while forcing it, we're walking the next step together. We're growing up together as a couple, as a family. And so it might feel painful, but it's actually growing up, and it's binding us together as well. So there is, in a way, something to celebrate as well in those times where where it feels hard, but it's actually good.
Yeah, and I think, it's important as well to normalize that often having a baby in those early years is a really hard time for relationships. Relationships go up and down. They're not smooth sailing the whole way, and most people understand that, I think. But I think expectations can be very off sometimes when you have a baby, because it's such an exciting thing. Your expectation is that life is going to become so much better. You're in love with your partner, and you're both going to be in love with your baby, and everything's going to be wonderful. You'll go out for lunch and the baby will be sleeping and have a glass of wine. And actually the reality is you're at each other's throats because you're tired. You go out for lunch and you can't even have a conversation because the baby's crying. So it's also it's really difficult then when you feel maybe like you're failing, or the relationship is failing because it's not what you'd hoped. And actually just remembering that it's totally normal to have these difficult times, and yet if you're able to come together and have some difficult conversations when you need to, that can help you through. And then it's okay to disagree. You know, you can have conversations where you disagree, but it's about being able to come together and move forwards in a way that you both are willing to compromise on.
Yeah, finding the right space for each,
Yeah,
and the things that are our foundation, the things that we really agree on, and the basic value of us
yeah,
as a family, and the
yeah,
ones that can stay with one or the other. And
yeah.
yeah, no,
And I think that values is a nice way of thinking about it as well, because if you can agree on your values, those kind of overarching things that you want for your family and that you want for your child, you can see that there are lots of different ways of achieving that. So you don't always have to kind of behave in the same way as a couple.
yeah,
You know, one parent might be more kind of loving and nurturing than the other because that comes more naturally to them. But the other parent can still behave in ways that come naturally to them that fit with that overarching value, for example, of building a child who is happy in
yeah.
life.
Yes, yeah. I was thinking as well, in my personal experience, that I would never have realized that without having the children. But it turns out I don't really enjoy playing board game that much. And I think it's a wonderful thing in theory, you know. I have this very nice, warm image of a family happily reunited around a board game. And in actual reality, with my family anyway, to me it feels like everybody's bickering and not happy, not agreeing on the rules. My husband is amazing at that. He is wonderful. And it took me a while to realize actually he can do the board game and I can go and do some, like, that's my time where I can do
Yeah,
something else and then be happy when they're finished. They're all happy about their game. They had a very warm and nice connecting time. I'm the one that kind of messes it up, and it's okay actually. For
yeah,
me, it's a joy to see them having that warm moment, and I can have a hot chocolate on my own, which is
yeah,
amazing too.
yeah,
Yes, and sometimes it's surprising, you know, like I would never have thought that was me.
yeah,
And probably my husband wouldn't have thought that was me, but we found a way to make it work for all of us.
yeah.
But it takes a while.
It does. And I think the other thing, maybe just the kind of other important thing to mention when we think about working together as parents, especially when we have differences, is that we haven't touched upon yet, is the importance of looking after ourselves first before we even start to think about how we agree on parenting. Because, you know, being a parent of a young child is hard. There's lots of challenges. It's tiring. And you know, you have to be okay enough in yourself to have those conversations. You know, we talked about them being difficult conversations. So before that step, really, we need to think about, well, how are we okay? And sometimes that's the other difficult thing in a partnership, is ensuring that each partner has what they need in order to, you know, look after themselves physically and emotionally. And I think, you know, one really common challenge for partners is, you know, the feeling of fairness of, well, you had an evening off, so I should have an evening off. And then the resentment builds if it doesn't feel fair. So I think that's another conversation that's useful for partners to have before maybe even getting to the whole parenting conversation is, okay, do you feel at the moment like you're getting enough of what you need? Do you feel like you're getting enough of what you need? And remembering that it doesn't have to be equal, because everyone needs different things. So a night out to one person might be just what they need, but to another person, it's a morning on their bike or reading a book for an hour with a hot chocolate on their own.
Yeah.
So just kind of help each other get what you need, even if it's not exactly the same.
Yes. So really, it goes back to knowing yourself and knowing what you need, um, knowing the other, and with their help, understanding what their need is, and then kind of there's gonna be compromises probably to, you know, like we won't. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm the only one, but I never feel that I have always exactly what I need to function, but enough, you know, to
Yeah.
have what kind of, yeah, good enough is good enough.
Yeah, exactly. Finding out what is good enough. And like you say, you need to know that for yourself before you can talk to your partner about it, or maybe you can help each other figure that out. But
Yes.
you know, what's good enough in order for you to be in a good place, get that in place, and then have those conversations about, okay, how are we going to be a team as parents?
And I really liked your suggestion of going for a walk with that. I think this idea of being somewhere outside, nature is always soothing anyway,
Yeah.
and plus not having that confrontation, like sitting around the table, even
Yeah.
if there is a glass of wine involved, there is something a bit blocking there. While if
Yeah.
we can walk together in nature, that
Yeah.
sounds like a really good trick to try
And it
out.
sometimes works when you have a young baby if they sleep in the pram, because you can push them or in the sling and you can actually have that conversation without the kind of interruption of having to feed or entertain or
Yes.
look after the baby.
That sounds wonderful. Perfect idea for this weekend.
Yeah. Go and have those conversations. Let us know
Exactly.
how you get on.
Absolutely. So you're here for if you have any more questions, you can always write it in the comments, and I'm sure Fiona and ourselves as well, we're going to be very happy to get back to you, and wishing you a wonderful weekend, a wonderful Christmas season as well.
Yeah.
And yes, thank you so much, Fiona. It's been really helpful chatting to you. We hope to have you back soon.
Thank you. I'd love to. And thanks for having me.
Thank you, Fiona.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.